Okay, great. Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming to this fourth Educate, Validate session and seminar. My name is Reverend Hal Rourke. I'm the priest here at the Church of the Good Shepherd. We're glad to have you here, and we hope this is an educational program for you. It is our tremendous honor and blessing to have the Right Reverend Mary Glasspool, who is Assistant Bishop in the Diocese of New York, to be with us. Welcome, Bishop Mary. Julia is going to do an introduction to her in a moment, so I'm going to keep this short. What I would like to say is that if you're a pledging member of the parish of confirmation confirmed, you'll be getting an email to vote on whether the Church of the Good Shepherd should raise the pride flag every month of June, and that will be sent out automatically at 7:15. There's only one response, yes or no. If you do have any problems with that, please email vestry@goodshepherdny.org, or you can email admin@goodshepherdny.org. More on that later. Without further ado, Julia, let's hand it over to you to introduce our guest.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the seminar. I'm going to say a few words about Bishop Mary Glasspool. The Right Reverend Mary D. Glasspool came to the Diocese of New York as an assistant bishop in April 2016. Previously, she had been suffragan bishop of Los Angeles. She was born in Staten Island, raised in Goshen, New York, and graduated from Divinity School in 1981. She has served in various roles throughout the community and the church with many amazing achievements. She was ordained deacon in June of 1981, and in March of 1982 was ordained priest. She is the first out lesbian to be consecrated a bishop in the Anglican community. We are so grateful to hear her speak and so excited to hear what she has to say. If you have any questions throughout the seminar, please either put them in the chat publicly or privately, or hold them until we ask for questions, whether throughout the seminar or at the very end. Thank you, Bishop Mary.
Thank you, Julia. And I want to begin by returning those gracious words to you, Julia. I am just so impressed with a young person in one of our churches who actually, takes some initiative to run a program. I mean, this is, every church I do a visitation at, one of the most common questions, and it's difficult because it gets asked in different ways, is how do we get the young people to come to our church, and how do we do this and how do we do that? And Julia's just running with the ball, and Julia, you're really smart and on top of it, and I have just super high praise for you and for your initiative and all that you're doing. So thank you for that. I'm proud of you, and I think the church should be proud of you no matter what the vote happens. So thank you for the Educate, Validate series. One of the reasons that I really also appreciate the series is that we've worked very hard in the entire Episcopal Church to create spaces for conversation, for dialogue, for education, to have safe places where people can ask questions and have their questions, if not answered, at least responded to. And that's obviously been a particular challenge during the pandemic, but the Episcopal Church has learned how to use Zoom, and here we are on this fourth Educate, Validate seminar on a Zoom meeting. And one of my many hopes for this meeting is that anybody who has burning questions will have them responded to and answered, and that we'll have good dialogue. Julia pointed me in some directions, given that the other three Educate, Validate seminars were on different aspects of history and politics and that kind of thing, about where the Episcopal Church has come. What is the Episcopal Church's stance on LGBTQ? I can barely remember the letters now, but the fact that we keep adding letters is also an indication of the motivation behind that, which is that the church is seeking to be inclusive of everyone, as a child of God, no matter what their origins, no matter what their gender identity, no matter what their sexual orientation or race or ethnicity or background or ability. So we keep adding letters. So somebody's gonna somehow edit that or break it down at some point. But right now, if you'll allow me, I'll just say LGBTQ plus as the kind of handle for all of that. It's not one community, it's a very diverse community with a wide variety of people with different experiences and from different places on the globe. So I'm grateful for the opportunity to have a conversation. The Episcopal Church was really looking at this as a church, looking at human sexuality in the 1960s. And if you trace the history through general conventions, it came up at the General Convention in 1970. And there was discussion about are homosexuals, and that's what people were referred to who found themselves erotically attracted to same gender people, were called homosexuals. And so the church was dealing with it alongside the history of the American Psychiatric Association, the American Psychological Association. And I don't want to cliff note all of that because it's been a long journey. So just to give a couple of dates, I believe it was 1974 when the American Psychiatric Association took homosexuality out of the disease mode and put it in a more neutral place in the psychological studies that were taking place. And please feel free to correct me if it's not my field. So I'm just trying to remember in my own journey, in my own history. In 1970, I want to say 1973, thank you. In 1976, when the Episcopal Church was affirming women's ordination as legal, canonical in the church, and dealing with the prayer book revision, both of those issues were needed to have two consecutive general conventions vote on them. So the two consecutive general conventions were 1976, which occurred in Minneapolis, and 1979, which occurred in Denver, Colorado. And what happened in 1979 was interesting because the then Right Reverend Robert Spears, who was Bishop of Rochester, was head of the Standing Commission on, I think it was called, the titles always change, the names change, the Standing Commission on Human Affairs. And there was a very positive report that came out of that Standing Commission that went to the General Convention held in Denver in 1979. And it affirmed homosexuals as full children of God, entitled to all the rights and privileges thereof. And what happened at the General Convention in 1979, and I'm giving it a shorthand, and it's from my perspective. I was there at that General Convention. I spoke on the open hearing in front of 1,500 people at that General Convention. I came out at that General Convention. And while the open hearing was overwhelmingly positive, of 33 speakers, only 3 spoke against homosexuality in any way, shape, or form. It was overwhelmingly positive. But the whole General Convention and the committee that was responsible for the report that was coming out of the Standing Commission couldn't really go there. And I believe it's kind of a retrospective analysis, and it's just my own personal sense that the conservatives in the church, for lack of a better name, the conservatives at the time said, all right, we've got women's ordination. We're not happy about it, but clearly there have been all these women ordained between 1976 and 1979, and the floodgates have opened. The prayer book has been revised, and we're going with, we can't go back on that, and we don't like that. So give us something. We're not gonna, you know, it was kind of a slap in the face to the then homosexual community. The affirming report got edited to say, well, yeah, homosexuals are children of God, but they may not be entitled to all the rights and privileges thereof. We don't think we want to ordain them. And we're certainly not talking about gay marriage. I mean, I'm using terminology that was not even in, you know, in use at that time. So there ensued from 1979 until 2009, a 30-year period where the church talked about these issues and had seminars like the one Julia has organized. And, you know, I feel like that was 30 years of my own ordained ministry. I've been ordained for 40 years now. When, you know, I had to, as a personal comment, I had to ask myself, what am I still doing in a church that treats me this way? Because for much of that time, I felt that I needed to hide a huge part of myself. For a long part of that time, I was in the closet. And you know, I've been with my partner for over 33 years now, but Becky was invisible in the churches that I served. And, you know, we can go through all of that, but, you know, I was uncomfortable. I said I would be honest. I meant to be honest. I was trying to draw the line between public and private. And so for me, during most of that time, my own sexuality, my own sexual identity was a matter of my private concern. And I did not feel I owed it to anybody to share my private concern in a public space that was frankly hostile. The church during the AIDS crisis was in a particularly interesting place, because what the church managed to say was, you know what, it's okay if you're gay as long as you're celibate, as long as you are in the closet. If you're sick, especially with AIDS, we'll take care of you. But God forbid you should have a healthy homosexual human relationship. That's what the church was saying to the gay and lesbian community. And what we've been fighting for is health and wholeness and transparency and a safe place for everybody to be themselves as fully loved children of God. Now, a real breakthrough for me came in 2009 when the church finally kind of moved off the dime and said, we're gonna take this a step further and lift the prohibition on the possibility of electing gay and lesbian clergy as bishops. Because it was later that year that I was elected a second bishop suffragan for Los Angeles, and it created something of a stir, possibly not as big as Gene Robinson's consecration and confirmation, which caused a 3-year not boycott, but it was there. The Episcopal Church was treated, I think, poorly in the Anglican Communion. It was difficult to get through those years, but what I tried to do was put a positive sense about all that, and to talk about the many gifts the gay and lesbian and now the LGBTQ plus community, the many gifts that this diverse community has to offer the church. Would the church as an institution accept those gifts, grow to be a better, healthier, more diverse institution that is actually more appealing to young people in recognizing those gifts? So here's one story that a little conversation before we actually started this seminar reminded me of is in 2012, I'd been consecrated for 3 years as a bishop, and I was invited not by the Bishop of San Diego, who still had his doubts, but by St. Paul's Cathedral in San Diego to come and participate with them, the people of St. Paul's, in the Gay Pride March in San Diego. And so I had to ask the bishop for permission. He was a colleague of mine, and it was iffy. And he gave his permission. He was going to be on vacation in July, so that's when the Gay Pride in San Diego was taking place. And so I said, okay, I'll preach at the cathedral. I'll participate in the Gay Pride March with the 150 members of St. Paul's Cathedral who had purple t-shirts and a rainbow flag and all of that. And there are a couple of points in that march that just still live with me today. First, that the Gay Pride March in San Diego is a family affair, and it's an issue of celebration, and the Latinx population was there in great numbers, and I had the privilege of kind of leading the group with the Episcopal Church flag. I was holding the Episcopal Church flag. And as we were marching, and I can't remember, I mean, I think there were bands and such and a lot of bubbles and stuff, but the people who were at the side of the street, young people were going, "You rock, Episcopal Church, you rock." And they would clap and they recognized the Episcopal Church flag. And I thought, man, this is the first time in my entire life that people have said, "You rock, Episcopal Church." And it was just fabulous. The Episcopal Church flag was seen as a positive symbol, as a positive sign, as an inclusive, courageous church that was openly, publicly, and with disagreements galore, dealing with not issues because we're people, but dealing with different people who were challenging more traditional theology, more traditional ecclesiology, more traditional ways of doing things. And it just stuck with me. They were young people who were cheering on the Episcopal Church, who saw it not as the Roman Catholic Church, not as the United Methodist Church, but as a church that was willing to deal with these issues and open our doors to everybody, conservative and liberal alike, people who disagree with us. but all are welcome to find a home, and we will treat everyone with respect and dignity. And that's one of our big goals. So, you know, the symbol of the flag is important because young people will, we have a church in Tarrytown, Christ in San Marcos. It's a bilingual church. And they fly the flag every day. If you drive down Route 9 in Tarrytown and you drive in front of Christ San Marcos Church, the rainbow flag is out there, along with other flags that represent different things. And people know, not just LGBTQ plus people, but people know, you know, wow, if they welcome those people, they will surely welcome me. And it's an open sign, an open door, an open invitation to everyone. And they're unafraid to fly the flag. So there's a little vignette. There are other churches who are taking what may seem like a courageous step. So I kind of want to stop and see if there are any, just for a moment. I could go on a monologue. I can answer any questions. The Episcopal Church and the Diocese of New York is an open, by and large, open and safe place for people to come and be themselves. I'm not naive. I realize there are churches, possibly in the Diocese of New York, as well as in other dioceses in the country, who are not as welcoming. And my heart goes out to them, and we're working on it. But I just want to stop there and see if there are any questions, either in the chat or online.
No one has put anything in the chat yet.
Okay. Does anybody have a question they want to share verbally or a comment?
I do.
Thank you, Lori.
Sure. I think that there's some confusion sometimes, and especially in the times that we're in, with conflict politically and things like that, that flying the pride flag may be seen as something political, as opposed to, as I see it, a human rights issue, quite frankly. I just wanted to get your opinion on maybe some ways we could address that in a way that could sort of open the dialogue there a little bit more.
Sure. Well, without dismissing everything, I mean, everything we do is political.
Right.
We're people. That's what the word means. Political is about what people do. I don't believe that raising a rainbow flag tells you how I might vote on the abortion issue, for example, or on redistricting school districts in New York City. It's just not gonna, that's not what it is. If there is a single message to the rainbow flag, and let me say, it's a symbol of Curcio. It's a symbol of Noah's Ark. It's, you know, the rainbow is used to symbolize quite a lot. And I think intentionally, it's meant to say that people themselves are diverse. We're diverse in our humanity. So I'm not sure I'm answering your question, Lori, because it's a difficult one. It's not, you know, let me say this. If a church decides to fly the American flag, I don't make the assumption that everybody there voted for Donald Trump.
Right.
It's an American flag. I don't want somebody to hold a symbol that means something to me hostage. And I think when people say, oh, well, that's a political symbol, we don't want it to say what it doesn't mean. I know this is a little bit off the beaten track, but a word of wisdom that someone shared with me long ago that's really helped me let go of that stuff is, Mary, what other people think of you is none of your business. And that has helped me let it just go. People are going to think what they're going to think. And we don't have control over everybody's mind. I mean, I don't. I hope Mark Zuckerberg doesn't either. But I would hope, and I think that most people would think, well, that's a church that welcomes everybody. And it's not the first time we've tried to employ a symbol to say that about the inclusive nature or aspect of our church. When I was rector of St. Margaret's Church in Annapolis in the 1990s, we had, by resolution of diocesan convention, you could vote on whether your church was affirming. And affirming was sort of meant to say, we respect the dignity of every human being. Of course, people thought, well, we had conversations about what does affirming really mean? Does it mean I approve of homosexuality? Because I don't want to approve of homosexuality. I mean, I'll welcome homosexuals if they come to worship here. And of course, that may or may not be true. But we've had these discussions before, using words as symbols, using covenants as symbols. Now we're using a visual symbol to talk about our desire to be inclusive, to be hospitable, to be welcoming, regardless of where a person comes from or what a person's beliefs are, or we want to acknowledge that everyone is a beloved child of God, and we will meet you where you are and have a conversation about what you want to have a conversation about.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Lori.
Bishop Mary,
Yeah.
someone is wondering what is right now the stance that has been settled upon of the LGBTQ plus community in the Episcopal Church?
Well, if you look at simply the resolutions we've passed, the stance is an open one. The Episcopal Church, the whole Episcopal Church, affirms the LGBTQ plus community. The whole Episcopal Church affirms marriage equality. The whole Episcopal Church has written special liturgical services that are now considered in the mainstream of liturgical services that are used for two people of the same gender who wish to be married sacramentally. So that's where the whole Episcopal Church is. And I will say this a little bit gently, but at the last meeting of the House of Bishops, the two things that we spoke openly about were our support for Ukraine in that unnecessary and unasked for war, and our support for transgender people. And we felt we needed to say that because you might be surprised at the number of bishops who have children who are transgender. And you might be surprised at the people you know who have children who are transgender and who are trying, sometimes desperately, to feel accepted, to be loved, to be open about who they are, and to feel free about their self-expression.
Thank you.
Oh, Miss Christine, go ahead. You can raise, we see your hand up.
Good evening, Bishop. Thank you so much. This is an honor to have you with us this evening.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here. Thank you.
I just wanted to share something that actually happened at coffee hour at church today. To the very question about raising the flag. And Father Hal's aware of this because he heard some of it. But there were 6 of us sitting at a table. 5 of us, I'd have to say, were like-minded and 1 wasn't. And we had an open discussion about it, and it went very well. I don't think this person will vote yes for the flag. However, I think he gained a better understanding of why we would want to welcome the community and let them know that our church is a safe place for them to come and worship. So I think having those little conversations with people who don't necessarily agree with us can hopefully give them just a little bit more of an understanding, even though they don't agree. And it went very well.
Wonderful. I can't compliment you highly enough on having the conversation, having it respectfully, you know, honoring anyone who has a difference of opinion, and you know, basically agreeing to disagree and still be part of a loving community. I mean, that's what we're striving for. And so Faye followed up on Lori's question about raising flags for issues. How do we respond from a place of faith when people state that they don't want to raise the pride flag, that raising it means anyone can ask us to raise any issue flag? Well, one response is, if someone wants to raise a flag issue, I would say you have precedent for inviting that person to orchestrate 4 different seminars specifically discussing what that issue is, and then have a vote on whether they should raise that flag. Secondly, there are other flags that fly in front of churches. I've seen flags that are against torture, and prisoner of war MIA flags. To me, that's a real ancient one, but there are still places that fly them, and other flags that represent other issues. So, I mean, it is possible. I just think the important thing, as you all have already pointed out, is the dialogue, having a discussion about it, talking about, why is this issue important to you? What does it mean to you? How may I support you in your growing spiritually, mentally, emotionally, physically, relationally? How may I help you, support you in your growth, in your relationship with Jesus Christ and with God? Because that's ultimately what it's about. And I know that Julia raised with me, you know, kind of what would Jesus do, or how do we deal with LGBTQ issues in the Bible? My friends, I have to be point blank honest and say, in biblical times, they didn't have this kind of conversation. It was a totally different time and culture. And applying some of the biblical language to issues that we're dealing with now is like saying, would Jesus approve of going to the movies? You know, I mean, there weren't movies in Jesus's time. So they didn't talk about that as an issue. And it's a similar thing about, they didn't talk about homosexuality as homosexuality. That is a modern construct. And so I, long ago, and in part because I say this as gently as I can, but scripture was used as a weapon to beat people over the head with, and particularly to tell people like me and Julia and many others that we were an abomination to the church. And to me, it's a miracle that I'm still here and that Julia, God bless you, are still here trying to do the best we can to create safe places for people to talk and to learn and to share what's on their heart. What is it that you might be afraid of? What's the fearful part of this? What do you think you might be losing, or what's happening that makes you, whatever the open question is that I want to listen to. I do want to listen. I really do.
Bishop Mary, Julia has a friend who's trans, and we invited him to come to our church, and he said, I can't because the church, God doesn't love me. My church taught me that God doesn't love me. And I tried to explain that our God does. I just said, how would you respond to that statement?
I think it can't be said enough that God loves you. God loves, God created everything that is, and God saw that it was good. And so to someone who's been told in their own church that God doesn't love them, again, I will be blunt. That, in my view, is spiritual abuse. It's spiritual abuse. And I think it's difficult to get at. But when churches say, God's going to punish you if you don't do this, that's spiritual abuse. Who are you to speak for God? So it's a hard one for me, in that I would want to say to that person, God does love you. Come be among people who know that God loves them and who are willing, through their own beings and their own relationships, to share God's love with you.
Can I jump in too, Bishop Glasspool?
Please.
I think that another thing that I would encourage you to share with your young friend is that I say this as a person who is non I'm not very religious, but I Church of Good Shepherd is part of my life because I grew up here. It's a very important community for me. So even if you don't feel like God loves you at this time, you can be among people who love you and accept you. Exactly what Miss Robbins said. And I was joking with my partner and my family about this last week, that I think that you're right, Bishop Glasspool, that's who are you to speak for God? And I don't know who this person is.
What's up, what it means?
Sorry. Oh, I thought I heard somebody talking.
It's okay. Go ahead, Gretchen. Sorry.
Saying who are you to speak for God? And it's if I were in that church, I'd be wow, this guy is really embarrassing himself in front of Jesus, really embarrassing himself right now by telling this child that.
Oh, yeah. And Christine has put, God created us all in his image, which is another true thing. And I might say, this is my own sort of theological interpretation of what it means to be created in the image of God. If you read, there are two creation stories in the book of Genesis. One has to do with Adam and Eve, and the other has to do with, on the first day, God created this, saw that it was good on the second day, and it's about all of creation. And when it comes to creating humanity, there's a double use of the plural. And it says, God created, he, they, them. created he they, them in the Hebrew. And so what I like to say, it's not an individual person who's created in the image of God. And it's not a dyad, a married couple who's created in the image of God. It's community that's created in the image of God. And community requires all of us. Community is the heart blood, the life of God. And we don't want to wreck God's community. Are there other questions or comments? Please feel free to disagree with me. I'm good. I see that the 7:15 time is approaching. I don't know how that's. Faye, do you want to say something about that? How that works? Are we going to continue to talk through that?
Absolutely, you can
Yeah,
continue
okay.
to talk. That was just so that I could make sure everything worked on my end while it went off while you were talking. And I am just, since you asked me a question and I got to open my mic, and everybody who knows me will know I never turned that down. Michael's laughing and clapping. Hearing you talk with this passion, and when you said, who are you to tell me to speak for God? Who are you to tell me what God wants for me? That is the most empowering spiritual statement I've heard in a long time, and I want to thank you for that. I love our Church of Good Shepherd. I love our family. I love our parish. And you know, we've had some rough times, and that was one of the most, you just fed my soul. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you for saying so. It's hard because I'm someone who trembles every time I get up into a pulpit. And I'm telling you, I could be wrong. I'll give it my heart. I'll give it my soul, and I'll love you all through it. But I have to say, I could be wrong, you know? And I think
I don't want to listen to this.
I think if you know, if preachers don't have a certain degree of humility, they probably have no business preaching. Because you know, I'll never forget when I was ordained to the diaconate. It was in June 13th, 1981. It was in the Cathedral of St. John the Divine in New York. I was ordained to the diaconate by Paul Moore, Jr. And there were 9 of us, I think, who were ordained to the diaconate at the same time in the Diocese of New York. And we were lined up in St. James Chapel with our presenters, one on either side in a straight line. And Paul Moore wasn't the preacher, but he was going to speak to us a little before the ordination. And so I was all ears because I loved Paul Moore. I thought he was great. So Paul got in, you know, all 6'4" of him. And I was like trying to sit up straight and be taller than 5'4". And so he said, all right, okay, I just want to say a few things to you. Be nice. And I thought I had misheard him. So Phil Kunhart was sitting in back of me. I turned to Phil Kunhart and I said, did he say be nice? And before Phil could answer me, Paul Moore said, I'm saying be nice because you know you're not God and I know you're not God, but you represent God to people. And if you're not nice, they're going to think God's not nice. So you watch how you behave, you know? And I've just carried that with me. And there are times when I'm sure I've let God down. You know, I've lost my temper and Maybe it's righteous anger. I don't know. Jesus was angry at injustice, so we can all justify times of righteous anger. But I try to remember that, you know, as a representative of God, when I'm wearing this collar, I don't want to commit road rage on the road. I want to drive carefully.
Can I say something?
Sure.
So we have, my husband and I have, we have a gay son, and he went to a Southern school for college. He graduated in 95, so it's been a few years. And he wasn't really out because he didn't feel it was safe to be a gay man down there. And he had some friends, for sure, lots of friends who were very religious, but they knew he was gay. And they said to him, Dave said, you know, Dave, we love the sinner and we hate the sin. And Dave said, and I love the bigot and I hate the bigotry. Bang.
Good for him. Good
Yeah.
for him.
That's
Another
a nice
great
phrase.
line.
It's another phrase that puts people in a, you know, in a place without being nasty, being kind enough, but like, look at the mirror where you are, right?
Yeah.
Look at the mirror
Yeah.
where you are.
Boy, that's a great line. I wish I'd had that sometimes, because I've heard we love the sin. I mean, we love the sinner, but hate the sin so many times. It's just excruciating.
Bishop Mary, I was wondering if you could, hold on, sorry, one more, sorry.
There was one other question
There
in
was
the email
another
that we
question you
didn't
could
address yet.
Possibly address,
Okay.
The question, how does being part of the LGBTQ plus community impact your faith? And if you heard a couple of like background noises, that's just my brother and dad. They're having technical difficulties. I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Okay, yeah, just wanted to let you know.
You know what? I guess in my own coming out process, I was in college, and the worst part of my own coming out to myself was that I thought for a brief time that God hated me. And it was so painful. And I finally, through the help of one of the chaplains, I realized that it's about love. It's about who we love. It's deeply about love, and God is love. And I thought, you know, God wouldn't have created me this way and not love me. It just means I got to find a way to be me. So I decided to treat the fact that I was a lesbian as a gift God had given me. And I was going to use that gift to maybe have some insight into what it's like to be oppressed, into what it's like to be a minority, into what it's like to have to stand up to principalities and powers. And I still believe it's a gift. So I'm grateful for the gift, and I wouldn't have lived my life any other way. And it certainly has impacted my faith. I mean, it's you know, when I was sort of growing up in the 60s and 70s, people like me, we had to deal with sexuality at a level that heterosexual people didn't. You know, it was just assumed you were heterosexual, so you have to deal with any of that. But we had to dig deep. I had to go to the basement of Dickinson College's library and take a flashlight to dust off the 4 books I had to look up on homosexuality. You know, I had to had to read the American psychiatric stuff and all, like, you know, and then I had to discern my vocation. So I continue to treat it as a gift. And I think, I hope that it's made me more sensitive than I might normally have been. Just look at what I'm saying, that I might normally have been. I hope it's contributed to my sensitivity to other people. Still growing. As Maya Angelou was fond of saying, I'm still becoming a Christian. I don't think we ever get there. It's about the journey. Keep learning, keep being corrected about some stuff, but keep learning, keep studying, keep educating, keep validating. Let's validate children of God.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any other questions, comments? Or Bishop Mary, do you have any closing remarks?
Well, let me say, it's a joy and a challenge to be with you all. I say it's a challenge because I'd much prefer that we were in person and we could have a little more free-flowing conversation. And I hope that if you do have any questions or comments that perhaps you felt that you didn't want to share with the larger group, please feel free to email them to me or to Julia. I'm not going to volunteer Julia, but Julia can forward them to me.
You can volunteer me.
I do want to say again what I started out saying, which is, wow, if nothing else, I'm so proud of the Church of the Good Shepherd for having someone like Julia and for supporting a 4-part online Zoom seminar. And I hope you do more of it. And I'll be with you, I believe, on Pentecost afternoon after a morning visitation.
And I want to piggyback on that, Bishop Mary. I'm so proud of the vestry, and I'm proud of our wardens, Faye and Michael, and the challenges and the stress that have been born in order to be this kind of witness. And I know that you're super busy, so it's so gracious of you to not just be here at this time, but people have received the emails. So if you're feeling like you're ready to make a vote, that will be available to you. And we are waiting to see the outcome, and I am hopeful that we are going to see Bishop Mary live, as she said, on Pentecost, June 5th, 4:30 outside. But first we'll do the vote, but this will not be our last visit. Bishop Mary, you are a delight, and people have been private texting me saying things like, she is great, she is awesome, and I keep writing back saying, I know she's great. Aren't we so fortunate in the Diocese of New York? You are a gem, and I just want to say, I find your personal sharing in your personal story and that openness and vulnerability just so infectious and inspiring and wonderfully empowering to try to be a better person, a better Christian, and a better Episcopalian. And we are just so grateful for your leadership and who you are.
Thank you, Hal. It's an honor to serve with you in the Diocese of New York. And I am proud, and we are all proud of Church of the Good Shepherd, Granite Springs. And I trust, and I do trust, that your leadership is appreciated. So thank you to the wardens, yes, and thank you to the vestry, and thanks to all of you. You've been a wonderful group.
Thank you so much, Bishop Mary. This has been wonderful. Thank you for your openness and your honesty and your wise words.
Thank you, Julia.
All right, everybody go vote.
All right.
Peace out.
Good night.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for coming. We love you.
Good night, Bishop Mary.
Love you.
Thank you so much, Julia. Thank you so much, everyone.
That's right.
Good job, Julia.
Great job, Julia.